Welcome to the Simpleton Podcast, the most popular podcast in heaven. Welcome, Marco Casanova.
Hey, thank you, Clark. It's great to be with you, brother. It's awesome.
All right, Marco and I know each other in IRL, in real life, for the boomers out there. All right, but Marco, I know you. I know that you do a fantastic RCIA program for the church.
Hey, thanks.
I also know you've been to seminary. I know that you, it was kind of wild when you said that you talked to Archbishop Chaput regularly, which is kind of cool for most people. And, but I don't know much about what your day job is, and I want to hear more about that. So How would you introduce yourself and talk about your day job, Marco?
Well, I'm a director at Desert Stream Ministries. So it's a ministry for persons who are struggling with sexual and relational brokenness. And I oversee our United States program, which is called Living Waters. So that's my main gig. And I'm married to a beautiful woman named Anya. She's from Krakow, Poland, and we live in Kansas City. And so, my main job right now is to help parishes, both Catholic and evangelical, so churches, parishes, become healing centers for people who are struggling with sexual stuff. And so we do this primarily through this work of Living Waters, 20-week group, process-oriented, men and women together, sort of becoming more chaste together. So it's kind of what I do.
Can I ask, you're not originally from Kansas City and your wife's from Poland.
Right.
How did you guys, are you here for Desert Stream Ministries?
I am, yeah. So I was born and raised in Houston, Texas, a little suburb, not little, a big suburb north of Houston, Kingwood. And I went to school in Philadelphia. So the Chaput a connection there. I went to seminary there for 8.5 years, and I left, in 2019. Came to Kansas City, became an intern for Desert Stream. And then I met my wife in 2021 in Wadowice, Poland, which is outside of Krakow. And I was doing a conference there. She was attending there, but she was a part of Living Waters Poland. So we kind of like our worlds collided and we were part of the same world, really. And then we got married a year later in Wadowice. She's born and raised in Krakow. And now we live in Missouri.
Oh my gosh.
I live in Missouri.
I know. We don't need any more PR problems for where we live. It's a place much better than anyone gives it credit for.
I love it. Honestly, when I first moved to Kansas City, I didn't even know how to conceptualize what Kansas City was, but I love it. Go Chiefs. It's a great place to live. We really like it. I mean, it's not Krakow, nor is it Houston, but it doesn't need to be. Kansas City stands alone, and it doesn't get what it deserves. Kansas City is a beautiful city.
That's my impression too. I think there's a couple Midwestern cities that fall in that category that are actually way better than, their PR program even attempts to say,
Absolutely. It's a beautiful city.
It's amazing to me that you went to Poland, met someone and got married. That's kind of wild.
Yeah, it was kind of wild too for me. Because, I come out of a background of same-sex attraction and dating. When I left the seminary, I thought dating was going to be so much easier, and it just wasn't for various reasons. Obviously, I had my own stuff to integrate. I needed to learn how to not only be a man among men with good brothers who were helping me in the Lord, but also how to love and honor woman, and not to be allergic to her or trying to bypass her or, living under some sort of weird accusation that I wasn't made for her. But I had to come out of myself to actually integrate as a man for woman. And so by the time I met Anya, I'd been kind of knocked down a little bit and in the dating world and kind of the injustice of good romance and all that, which is good. But I had to learn that when I'm growing into my gift giving as a sexual person, my gift isn't always going to be received, and that's okay. And then I met this woman, Anya, overseas, and it was actually kind of strange, Clark, because, we're at this conference and you don't usually date attendees to conferences. That's not.
Well, you were a presenter at the Congress. Is that right?
I was. And so And so I met her, and then I was like, hey, let's go get pizza. So we got pizza. And honestly, long story short, I really liked her, in this week time that we had kind of in this big group. And so I wanted to be more intentional. So we did the long distance thing and then proposed and got married in December of 2022.
Okay. Can you help? All right. So you've said very generally what Desert Stream does, and you've also hinted that it's international.
Mm-hmm.
Can you like kind of break down like what it actually does? Like, are you doing like group sessions or prayer groups or therapy, or can you help tell us what the ministry actually does?
Yeah. So Desert Stream, there's one Desert Stream headquartered in Kansas City, but there's many expressions of living waters that Desert Stream oversees, both domestically and internationally.
Are these two different groups, Living Waters and Desert Stream?
So Desert Stream is just sort of the organization. It is,
Okay.
and Living Waters is the group. So yeah, all the water imagery and kind of confusing, but one Desert Stream, many groups of living waters that kind of flow from this central station of Desert Stream Ministries. And what Living Waters is basically, it's just a 20-week group where men and women gather. It's a closed group, so you apply to it, and you come with expressed areas in which you want to grow in chastity. So it really is sexual and relational in nature. So people struggling with same-sex attraction or gender dysphoria, sexual addiction, marital struggle, whatever the case might be, whatever your starting point is, sexually and relationally speaking, Living Waters hopefully is a good guide. And it's 20 weeks. It's based on a curriculum. So we have a book, you can buy our book online. And there is a structure to the night. It is worshipful. There's a teaching, there's witness, but then there's corporate and personal prayer ministry times in which persons who are struggling in areas and hopefully gaining some ground in chastity together are able to walk with a confidential boundaried group for the duration of 20 weeks. So we hope that it augments, for example, priestly confession. So if you're going to confession and you're sort of unable to overcome certain sins of unchastity, that Living Waters would be a good augment for you. It's like, hey, walk with these people who are kind of open about these issues and able to go subterranean with you, not therapeutically. We're not therapists, so it's not a therapeutic process group. It really is just disciples gathering in confidence with boundaries, so it's safe, where disciples can help each other just get better as sexual beings in our sort of confused, addicted culture. So I hope to provide little havens of healing for people. We've been around for 45 years. So we were founded the same year as Courage in 1980. And so my boss, Andrew Comiskey, the founder and director, he and his wife, Annette, founded Desert Stream and the Jesus movement. So California, Southern California, John Wimber, Vineyard movement, that was the wave that brought Desert Stream to the world and to the nations, really. About 15 years ago, Andrew became a Catholic because of the theology of the body. Christopher West gave him a copy. He read it, really, really ate it up, and started imbuing the Living Waters material with the theology of the body. So as Christopher West says, Living Waters is the pastoral application of the theology of the body. That's what he believes. I believe it too. You sort of read this tome of JP2 and you're like, well, how the heck do I put that? How the heck do I appropriate that in my broken life? And for me, being a guy who struggled with same-sex attraction, I needed a guide to help me see my own self, my own personhood in the theology of the body, and Living Waters helped me do that. So hopefully that's what happens in these little groups throughout the world.
So at the end of 20 weeks, that like 3.5 months? No, sorry. No, that's more than
it's
that.
It's like more
half
like 6
a year
months.
almost.
Yeah. Half a year.
All right. You kind of graduate. Like, I mean, like what happens after that? Cause like, I don't know much about Courage, which for people who don't know, Courage is like a group of Catholics with same-sex attraction that support each other, know? But my understanding is it's kind of like never ending. Like you can just be a member of it and just keep going to meetings for however long you want to, right?
Sure.
But this 20 week with an end point, what happens at the end point? Do you become a leader of the next group?
It depends. Like some people are like, wow, that was great. Like that really helped me, thank you. Gave me sort of uh, a, a lexicon or a language to understand my wounds or whatever. So some people are like, great, great, once and done. Others are like, well, I'll go through it again. That was really amazing, but I need to go through it again. I need to go through it maybe once or twice more. Hopefully some will say, hey, I want to lead this. Like I want to help. I want to be on the team. I want to be the one who's leading the prayer ministry or whatever the case might be. So we always say that Living Waters recreates itself. So people after the 20 weeks will hopefully be interested in becoming a part of the healing army, so to speak, and joining a team to become an agent of mercy for other people. It's not so dissimilar from, the AA model of becoming like a sponsor, so to speak, in that once you've received some healing, that you also can be an empowered member of Jesus' body. You don't need sort of to be the therapist or the moral theologian, although those are important. But you can be an empowered member of Jesus' body and impart healing to people who are in need. So hopefully the ethos of Living Waters is that lay people can do the work of the ministry of healing, and the church can be this healing place for people. And I think, Clark, as Catholics, we're a little allergic to that right at first because we love the professional as Catholics. I think we do. And it's fine. I mean, it's good that we have such a regard for the professional, going to the therapist, going to the really amazing spiritual director, going to the wonderful confessor. But we don't do well member to member in these areas. It's more like, whoa. I only go to that person, this $150 a week. I only do that, but I hope Living Waters is able to provide safe space for people to be known one to another, not in some crass, imprudent way, but in a way that's saying, hey, I need to enlist my brothers and sisters to help me here because my priest can't be my walking partner. My therapist isn't my walking partner, but my community hopefully is.
So there's these other groups like Courage, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then there's also, you mentioned kind of like AA, but I know that there's also SA, like Sexaholics Anonymous. They have this like white book. And I've never heard of Sexaholics Anonymous dealing with same-sex attraction or something. I've always heard of it, or gender identity, or all these other things, But like, do you guys have like a lot of crossover with those groups? Like, are people who come into your group also a member of these other groups, or?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think, yeah. It's not unfamiliar for a person going through Living Waters to need the help of an SA group, for example. SA, like you're saying, it doesn't address same-sex attraction or gender dysphoria. It doesn't really have a stance on that, so to speak. I would say that SA is very helpful for persons who are trying to gain some self-mastery in a habitual habit, of a pornography and masturbation in particular, or even acting out sexually with the opposite or the same sex. I've heard some people say that they're not very comfortable expressing their same-sex attraction in the SA groups, but I think the purpose of the SA groups is for sobriety. And I think they do well to do that. And so it does help particular persons coming to Living Waters who are really addicted, to have another on-ramp like an SA group, to have that sort of gritty accountability. I even found that really helpful in my own life. When I was in the seminary, I'd go to some SA groups every twice a week, really. And those were really helpful for me to gain self-mastery, just to be known in an area of my life where I felt so conquered, so defeated, and I needed that. Courage, we love Courage. Courage is, we would say, sort of this, it's the Catholic apostolate when it comes to same-sex attraction. It really is. It's historically that they are a custodian of anthropology, understanding who the human person is. Courage would be slightly different in a couple ways. And the first being, Living Waters isn't just about same-sex attraction. So Courage would be quite focused on the SSA thing. But Living Waters, it's like, well, it's level ground, no matter your symptom of the fall, come one, come all. So
I have a question about that, by the way.
Yeah, sure.
So there are a lot of sexual issues someone could have, including some that you're almost not even allowed to say out loud, right? Like pedophilia type problems or abuse issues or whatever, right? Is your program even encompassing people like that, or does that get to be too distracting? Because if someone's got a more vanilla issue and then here's a guy who's got pedophilia or something as the issue, right? Like, do you guys encompass any type of sexual issue, or just do you limit it?
No, we do. I mean, there's really no limit to it. Obviously, as people who are respectful to the law in regards to these things, if there is something shared, and we let participants know that if something is shared that is illegal or intends to harm oneself or another, like we are mandated to report that, and that's clear. But if a person is truly repentant and looking for healing in an area, especially in these shameful areas where people can dip into more devious expressions of sexual brokenness, we would say, okay, well, if you're committed to it and you've done the proper work or are doing the proper work in order to ensure that you're being known by the proper people who need to know that you deviated in these areas, then of course we'll walk with you and see you through it, hopefully. So yeah, no, there's really nothing off the table, so to speak.
Wow. My other question is, this is a big picture question, but I've known a lot of people who, like, I grew up in the era where coming out of the closet was still a big deal. I feel like today that's just not even a thing. You're just, it's not a big deal when someone states that they have same-sex attraction, homosexuality or anything. But
it's kind of so normal. Like,
right.
Oh, great.
It's basically
like
been
my
normalized.
Facebook post got 100 likes. It's like, great.
Right. You might become more popular.
Right.
Whereas like in the 90s, I do remember pretty bad discrimination or feelings. I grew up in Texas also towards people who were homosexual. I also know that when they came out of the closet, it was not an easy thing at all, And one of the things I've always wondered about that is I almost, I think part of Christianity is kind of living in the light and not having a double life and being open, like not hiding who you are so much, And I almost felt like sometimes when these people would come out, I'd be like, well, even if you don't think this is a great lifestyle, it's better that they're out than that they're either not sharing to anyone what's going on or living a complete double life. You know?
Yeah.
Is that part of what? Do you agree with that statement? Or
I do. I mean, I think there is, in a way, like being known in the context of a good Christian community is a form of, I would say it's a good form of coming out in a sense, not so much like a here I am world, like whether you like me or not, this sort of I'm going to be gay, and if you don't like it, I'm going to defriend you type of thing.
That, by the way, was not the attitude of the 90s. Like it wasn't like I'm coming out, I'm going to defriend you. It's like I'm coming out, you're going to defriend me.
Oh yeah, sure.
That was much more the situation, and I felt like that.
I think the landscape of homosexuality is drastically changed from that
right.
time.
I agree. Yeah.
I think what Living Waters provides is a good, confidential, again, boundaried space where somebody can say, I'm in tension with my love for Jesus because I struggle in these areas that I'm very shameful about, I think the major change of homosexuality today, a couple of things come to mind. One is there's little shame around it for a lot of people today. I'm not saying most Christians, like most Christians who come to Living Waters groups, there is still a tinge of shame, but there is a shamelessness about homosexuality in the culture today, whether good or bad. That's just kind of seems like to be the culture milieu that we're in. And then secondly, there is especially in my generation, we've totally bought into that homosexuality or the LGBTQ thing. It's an ethnos. It's a cultural group. It's like me. It's on the same level as my Mexican heritage, so to speak. It's a defined, protected people group. And so that creates an interesting dynamic for somebody who's coming to grips with their need for the Lord and then realizing I'm experiencing something that I actually am shameful about, and I need help in, because the culture has so many opinions about that. Well, that's who you are, or you were born that way, or you need to live out and proud. And when the church is saying, well, I mean, there is a sort of integrity to coming out, so to speak. But can we do that in a space that would actually be helpful for people who want to live in accord with Jesus? And I think today we're finding that to be actually quite difficult. For example, all of these like conversion therapy bans and all of that, it creates such an interesting landscape for persons who are truly Catholic, truly Christian in their heart of hearts, and who want to live a chaste life, who want to grow in that. And yet the culture is saying, well, you can't receive therapy for that, or, to sort of live reconciled to that would be dangerous or would increase suicidality. All of these claims now in regards to persons struggling with homosexuality that make it difficult to come out in an orthodox way. And so I think Living Waters provides a place for people to say, yeah, I'm not going to lie about my life anymore. I'm struggling here. These are my desires, disordered or ordered as they may be. These are them. And I want to grow in Jesus, and will you help me? And I think Living Waters does that for people.
I knew a priest in the 90s, and he worked at a college campus, and he was very meek and mild-mannered. And I kind of thought he was almost like, I think we as students thought he was kind of a hippie, but I don't think it was hippie at all, actually. But like during that time, during the Clinton administration, Jocelyn Elders came out and said, she was the Surgeon General. I don't even think we have a Surgeon General anymore.
Oh, no.
Do we? I'm
sure we do. Isn't that a thing?
I'm not so sure we do. I would think during COVID, the Surgeon General would have been front and center if we did. I think Jocelyn Elders might have broken the Surgeon General position. I think when they took
Surgeon General and you're just being coy about it.
Maybe, but I think she stepped down, and I don't know that any replacement ever happened. But she said some things about masturbation that were kind of interesting. Like she said, it was very healthy, and the problem with Republicans is that they weren't doing it, and that made them very unhealthy. And she just said really weird things, and it was very much in the news. And this priest had to stand up and say, as his homily, had to say, this is, wrong. And wow. That if you don't do it, it's not unhealthy. And, and I'm proof. And it was so wild to watch a priest look at a huge group of college students and give that homily.
Right.
But it was also just like where, the professional psychology type representative, the Surgeon General, had differed from the Catholic teaching on the issue.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And
well, good for him.
I know it was. I really admired him for giving that, homily. Yeah. And it also meant a lot because he said it. He was such a meek guy that it just worked well. Had he been like a very forceful personality, it would have been a very different homily.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. No, I love that. I love that quiet confidence and a courage. I pray that for our priests. This is a tough culture that we're living in. And there are so many opportunities for pulpit statements, I think. But it's again, going back to the cultural context, it's hard. It's difficult to make statements because of people's opinions and the landscape that has drastically changed in regards to these issues. I mean, I do think today the issue is identity. It's anthropology. Chaput said it in a First Things article that the question today is, who are we? Who are we? I mean, I have it here, actually. It's beautiful. The most urgent challenge that Christians face in today's world is anthropological. Who and what a human being is. Whether we have some higher purpose that warrants our special dignity as a species. Whether we're anything more than unusually smart animals who can invent and reinvent ourselves. And yet our focus for 2024 is a synod on synodality. saying these things, of course, will invite claims of disloyalty, but the real disloyalty is not speaking the truth with love. And that word love is not some free floating balloon of goodwill. It's an empty shell without the truth to fill it. I love that. I mean, I think it's the question today. And if we don't get it right, we don't have the courage to speak it out prudently and lovingly, then I think we're missing a kind of an important piece today.
I though feel like as someone who wants to evangelize, that the whole idea of like, do you even have a purpose? You know, that is like the primary question. Like, is there a meaning to life at all? Right.
Yeah, right.
And then all of this moralizing, even about sexuality or whatever, can be very important. But it's if someone doesn't think they have a purpose, you're completely wasting your air.
Yeah.
You know, on this issue. Right.
Yeah.
And I do think that's the issue. I think this like, I forgot the word for it. We say this word all the time on the podcast, but it's like when you don't believe, nihilism, right? Like when you have no purpose, when you have no meaning, when you have no whatever, and you're just kind of in that nihilistic state, moralizing is like almost completely irrelevant.
Yeah. Right.
You know? And so I feel like there's this like evangelization we need to have just to get that anthropology right, that like your place in the universe and your place before God and the specialness of it.
Yeah.
You know?
I agree. And I think probably where we are today is especially more quote conservative Catholics are really eager to have a solid anthropology, which I think is good, but it has to be a double-barreled response. The anthropology, but also how are you walking with people? Like what is the pastoral response? What does it look like for somebody who has taken hormones and has surgically transitioned, so to speak, and wants to live now as a disciple of Jesus? You know, we have things in place?
I have thought of that, and you're actually doing it. Like I've seen someone who has really messed up their body at the age of like 22, like not successfully transitioned, not successfully been, you know, their born sexuality or anything. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, what if you're their spiritual director? Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? What do you say? What do you do? How do you love them? How do you get them to blossom? You know?
Yeah.
And man, that's a hard question.
Yeah.
But I feel like you guys are tackling that at some level, like giving space. Hey, do you want to come talk about it at least? Right. You know?
And I think it's messy, Clark. Like, I think a lot of people have this kind of dim view of Living Waters. Like, oh, we're just sort of stuffing people with anthropology. Like, come on. But it's not like that at all. I think our point is, if we don't have a direction, the accompaniment is empty. We speak of accompaniment, but it's like accompaniment to where, you know? Right. And I think yes, the anthropology, the roadmap, the direction, yes. And how are we walking with people? How are we asking the questions like, how is that like for you? And, you know, why are you here? What brought you to this group? And all of those things that are, I think, beautiful entry points to understand where somebody is at, and inviting them into the more slowly but surely and saying, I'll walk with you, you know, we'll walk with you. So yeah, I agree. I hope Living Waters can be an answer to the sexual identity confusion today.
Let me ask this. So I'm going to ask a PR question, then I want to come back to this kind of liberal conservative idea for a second. But I've heard about Courage for a very long time. And I know of the ministry you're a part of, maybe partly because I live in Kansas City and I know people who literally have met the founder, you know, and very good reputation. He's always known as like such a great guy.
He's a good man.
But no one ever like says very particularly even what you guys do. Right. And one of the problems I had with Courage was, even though I think I heard about them from something Benedict Rochelle had written, and maybe around the year 2000, right? It's when I first heard about them, maybe late 90s, 2000-ish, you know? And a lot of people heard about them. And if they met someone who had same-sex attraction or whatever, they'd mention that group. And I'm like, is that group even real? Like, we never meet them. I never met I never met someone. I'm like, is this just 12 or 10 dudes in New York City, like who founded a very rebellious little group, and we keep citing them as like the Catholic answer, you know?
Yeah.
And now I realize that it's much bigger than that, you know? And I also realized that you guys are much bigger than I ever would have suspected also. But your PR is very small.
Yeah.
You know? And so I got two questions related to that. Is that a little bit on purpose? You know, like that you need to be known by the people you need to be known by and don't need to be known by everyone? Or, which by the way, you were on Pints for Aquinas and did like 90K plus views. So you're not hiding much if your PR is to keep a low profile. But, or is, is that PR on purpose? And then how do you like actually find these people who have these struggles? You know, are they just Google searching you? Because it doesn't feel like you're widely known.
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, it's not on purpose for sure. I just think we're not popular, you know, for various reasons, you know.
Neither's our podcast, so we're doing great.
Mine either. Don't worry. You're more popular than me, Clark.
What is your podcast, by the way?
Desert Streaming. My colleague Katie and I would do it together. It's fun. Right. No, it's not on purpose, but I think we're a prophetic healing ministry. And what does that mean? Well, it means that we have a clear anthropology, and we have a praxis to at least that helps that. We don't do everything, you know. We're not therapists, we're not priests, but we at least provide hopefully some empowered lay folk that will help you. But I just think we're not popular because of the homosexual thing. We have a particular stance on homosexuality that isn't popular. And what would that be? That we would see homosexuality as emblematic of a wound, that it is emblematic of something deeper psychologically, emotionally, that can seek some resolution psychotherapeutically. It's not a complete eradication of same-sex desire, but you can get better and it doesn't have to dominate your life. And Jesus, deeper than any sort of fracture or same-sex attraction, deeper still is Jesus, who can redeem us. And we would be very much of the camp that says, yeah, God can do something with your experience, your broken experience of sexuality. Because I feel like today there's so many ministries who are like, well, he can't really do that. You know, he can do this, but he can't touch the homosexual thing. And we would say like, well, why not? You know, and can we have an empowered view of an empowered and realistic view of what that looks like, what healing looks like for somebody who experiences same-sex attraction? And we would say yes and amen. Absolutely. Now, I would say, Clark, that's not very popular for probably various reasons. Like, people don't necessarily want to take a hard stance on homosexuality. I think there are kind of, quote, easier ways that people prefer, you know, than something like a Living Waters group. I'm really excited, though, that we just formed an Episcopal advisory board of some amazing bishops. So Archbishop Naumann's the chairman, and Cardinal Burke, Archbishop Brolio, Archbishop Coakley, Archbishop Aquila, all these bishops who are saying, yeah, we love Living Waters and we love what you're doing for people. So yeah, it's no PR stunt like, oh, we're trying to fly under the radar. It's just we would like to be bigger, but we're just not.
Yeah, I mean, I'm very sympathetic with people who don't want to take a hard stance on the issue. You know, I'm not looking to lose any friends over this issue, you know. Yeah. But I don't want to shy away that the truth that, you know, that there's a lot of truth in what you guys do and everything like that. And let me ask this question, though. So the distinction between the psychological and the spiritual, and maybe even the psychiatric, is not very distinct, you know, and it seems very odd to me that you can have a Catholic psychologist. Like there's a certain tool set that the psychologists and the psychiatrists use. One's medical and one's like therapeutic, right? But clearly there's enormous overlap with the spiritual life, with morality. Yeah. Right. And it doesn't seem like even in Catholic universities that's being touched very well or being worked on very well. Like where does, you know, what's the role of the spirituality within the psychological? Yeah. Right. And then you said that you thought there should be some psychological or therapeutic like it should be at least an attempt to address different types of sexual gender identity, SSA, all these different things, right?
Yeah.
If you think that, are you guys, I don't know what to say, like either doing the academic work or encouraging psychologists to branch out into this, or are there psychologists already doing it that you guys are endorsing, or,
that's a great
beyond
question.
your 20-week group?
Yeah. So, I think this is an amazing question. So I want to try to the spiritual dimension and the psychological. So when I think of the spiritual dimension, I do think of the virtue of chastity. And as set out in the Catechism 2337, chastity means the successful integration of sexuality within the person. So chastity as integration, I think that's an important starting point. What does that mean? I like that language of integration. I think that's a good word to use in regards to sexual identity issues and any sort of sexual and relational brokenness, that my goal is integration. It's about becoming, like John Paul II would say, becoming what you are. I am a man by nature. My body is showing me who I am. My body's a blueprint of my identity. And so chastity is, am I in harmony with that? Are there parts of me that are disconnected or disintegrated from that core reality of who I am as a man? So I think that's chastity. It's not just, stop having sex outside of the context of marriage, although it includes that, but that's not really what chastity is. Chastity does not equal abstinence or continence. Chastity is integration. So spiritually speaking, I think that's a great goal. Now, what does that mean psychotherapeutically? I think it means a lot. Now, the Catechism also says that the psychogenesis of homosexuality is largely unexplained or largely unfounded, or largely, what does it say? Largely unexplained, remains largely unexplained. I think a lot of people will say, well, that means that we don't have to sort of converse psychologically about homosexuality. I don't think that's what the Catechism is saying. I think the Catechism is saying this is a theological document and we're not going into a sort of psychological statement.
I find that so strange, because it's like, I think the Catechism is one of my rocks of like, just, this is the magisterium, let's go. Yeah. Right. But like, the Catechism is already 30 years old.
Yeah.
And it never claimed to be summarizing psychological research.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, I mean, just the idea that that type of statement in the Catechism would be used as authoritative 30 years later is just strange.
Well, I think it's strange in that the way I see it is that the Catechism is saying it's good for you to opine. It's good for you to think about these issues. We're not going to think about it because we're theologians. But if you're a psychologist and you have good findings in regards to the meaning of homosexuality that needs mining therapeutically, go for it, And this is where, again, my generation is so allergic to a lot of the findings of what homosexuality is. I mean, there's been 100+ years of research. Elizabeth Moberly, Joseph Nicolosi, these people have really mined what is homosexuality in both men and women. Nicolosi largely was just male homosexuality. Elizabeth Moberly went into a little bit of both, but there was good thinkers behind this. But for some reason now, there's a movement, there's an allergy to any sort of psychological understanding of why somebody would experience homosexuality. And again, I think it goes back to the cultural milieu. Like, people think that this is an ethnos, that you're sort of born this way or you're this by nature. And so any sort of psychological stuff that may be helpful in understanding one's wound of same-sex attraction is absolutely like anathema today, which I think is really unfortunate, because I have found the psychotherapeutic stuff really helpful in understanding my own experience of homosexuality.
Okay, so pause right there. You found the psychotherapeutic stuff helpful. What stuff is that? Meaning, like, is there actually a psychotherapeutic like method related
like
to this?
Like a modality, or there are certainly modalities, especially Joseph Nicolosi. He wrote about, and he mainly definitely just focused on male homosexuality. So he wouldn't claim to be an authority in terms of female homosexuality. But his work on male homosexual, he would call them non-homosexual homosexuals. It's weird, but whatever. I think his language is a little dated.
I think
in terms
it's more
of
interesting to know he exists and to know exactly what the methodology is. But but there are thinkers who are academic who have been working on this.
Absolutely, and so the modalities I are one thing, but also just sort of like for example, Nicolosi would say that in someone's experience of homosexuality, there is usually two things operative at a developmental period in their life. So, and usually with a father figure, usually that's the father or a father figure. Maybe father was absent because of death or whatever reason. So stepdad or whatever the case might be, like this father figure, that there was an injury of sorts. And that could be different things. That could be an overexertion of someone's presence, maybe through abuse, or maybe someone's vacancy because they just worked hard and weren't very attuned as fathers, which was more my dad. And the child then perceives an injury of sorts. He perceives a lack of attunement, a lack of advocacy on part of his father. And then what happens after this sort of injurious thing, there's a judgment towards father. And in that judgment, there's a defense that's built. There's almost like an attitudinal posture that's built between the father and the son. And in a way, that posture, that defensive detachment, that judgment is then on all that the father represents, on all man, right? And so there's almost like in the defensive detachment, there's an isolation that could happen in a person. And in my own life, I can kind of recall that. And in that way, there's a moment in this sexual development later on where the person who experienced this defensive detachment, this injury, this judgment, that he now sees the exotic as erotic, Joseph Nicolosi would say. Now, in a normal development, the male, the son, the boy would see woman as erotic because she is exotic. She is other than himself. But in this defensive posture thing, the boy has not integrated as a boy among boys. There's been something that he hasn't been able to enter into good male intimacy, good male camaraderie. And in that, he sees other boys as exotic. And then there's an eroticization that happens. Now, all of those findings by Nicolosi, that's all Nicolosi. They're not to absolutize everybody's story, but
where's he from, by the way?
California. He was
so he's an American.
Yeah, he's dead now,
or what?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay.
He died pretty young, and his wife is still alive, and his son Joseph Nicolosi Jr. is still carrying on.
By the way, I'm glad I asked that question because he sounds like he's like Russian or something. You know what I mean? I was like, so is this some Russian thinker you're quoting?
No. This is straight up American. And so he was great. I mean, he was kind of a galvanizing, funny dude. But yeah, his son is carrying it on. But I find that his work, especially his early work, is so helpful. I mean, it's so helpful. It's not to say like you have to find your story in Joseph Nicolosi. It's not to say that at all, but it's to say, hey, are some of these findings interpretive keys in understanding your own experience?
Did you find him as an interpretive key for you?
I did. It's so helpful. I mean, it's still kind of helpful because, I'm able to read my wounds, so to speak, and able to know when I'm being sort of dodgy or whenever I feel lust towards the same sex and I feel homosexual temptation. Like I'm able to kind of sit back and have some just self-awareness. Like, okay, what's going on? Where am I in need of male intimacy? And I'm starting to go sideways a little bit, but I need good brothers to help me, or there's maybe focused work that needs to be done and I don't feel man enough to do it, or whatever the case is. I find that his thinking is so important and honestly so empowering. I think a lot of people think Joseph Nicolosi is kind of a bad word today with my generation of SSA people. They're like, oh, they're kind of like, don't put that Nicolosi on me. And I'm like, dude, why? He's so helpful. Like he's he's not coercive at all. He's not like this weird conversion therapist, like shock therapy or lobotomies. It's like, it's just kind of helpful, insight into what could have happened in your development.
I sense that there's kind of I don't know if subculture is the right word, but there's this group of people who have the same sex attraction in the Catholic Church that you kind of like are communicating with and know each other, right?
Yeah.
And you're like, because like this name, I've never heard of it before. Mm-hmm. but you're actually like, these people know who he is and have opinions on it. Yeah,
for sure. I mean, Joseph Nicolosi would have been, a friend of Father John Harvey, who founded Courage. So he definitely was in the world of the movements that were helping persons with same-sex attraction, especially Christian and Catholic in particular. Friend of Andrew Comiskey. So his thinking is I find it very important in understanding it. So yeah, understanding homosexuality in particular.
Let's kind of broaden our conversation to maybe the church in general. And maybe I'm going to frame this too much where I'm not going to get your best, most honest opinion, but let me frame it anyway. Every once in a while, you'll see someone who's doing a great work, and it could be like a super saint, like a Mother Teresa or a JP2, right? Or it could just be someone in your local community who's doing something hard, you know? And they're kind of getting flack from the left and the right, And I know cases where this has happened and people are like, man, I really think this person's really doing the Lord's work. Why does no one support them? And my sense is like, unfortunately, that's almost a sign they're doing the Lord's work. That like if you're really on the narrow way, there's like the conservatives aren't going to quite like you and neither will the liberals, and if you want to have friends, you can either just throw in with the conservatives or throw in with the liberals. But if you're really going to walk this other way, expect to get friendly fire the whole time.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Like when you think of the church today, I think we've come a long way in many ways. And part of it's about us becoming like having more the feel of being a religious minority in America. I feel like that's becoming more and more the case, do you feel like this need to kind of like, I don't know, like either bring back this old time religion where it's like we, vocally condemn homosexual behavior all the time, or do you think that that's like not really the way forward? Like what's your gut feeling on all that?
Yeah, I think we've done a good job as a Catholic world, as a Catholic church, especially in America, in being like, I feel like we have a good bishops' conference, for example. I think we have we have really good guys who are in leadership. And what I think that does, and even looking at our seminaries, like you said earlier, I think we were conversing about it, like the seminaries are pretty good. Like we have good thinkers in America in regards to moral theology and whatnot. So I think that's very good. Now, I think where we need to grow is, well, how do I actually work this out in my own life? And so is it sort of a nostalgia to go back and just have the, fired brimstone, like this is the church's teaching? I don't think that that's the answer, but I think we're in a good juncture where we have been challenged by really difficult circumstances that Jesus can redeem. And I don't really know how he can, but I do know what I can do in terms of gathering with people, praying for the Holy Spirit to fall and to help us. So I don't think it is to go back and to reclaim a religion that never was. I don't like the nostalgia today in a lot of Catholics in regards to let's go back and do that. I mean, I have great respect and I truly love the extraordinary form of the Roman Rite. I don't have any qualms with that. I don't like the nostalgia to a time that never was, So I do want to go forward, but in an empowered Holy Spirit kingdom way. I think we need to. Otherwise, we're not going to survive if we don't really bring the kingdom of God in areas where we need it. And I think we need it in this area of homosexuality and gender confusion. So yes, the solid anthropology, but something we haven't developed, I dare say, as Catholics, is a praxis, and courage. I love courage, but courage would be more in a way that is very, very helpful for persons who are struggling with same-sex attraction. But I'm talking about even taking it a step further. Like, I'm talking transformation, like people being transformed by Jesus, and that the anthropology is actually empowered and transformational. I think that needs to be the next chapter in our history, so to speak.
Well, let's talk about that a second. So to talk about a little bit about what you're saying about like the past that never was or what, but like, I find that, so our ministry at Simple House is over 20 years old now. And, one of our slogans from the very beginning was an experiment in Christianity, right? Like, and what I meant by that was like, let's just take Jesus's words very seriously. Mm-hmm. Let's see what happens. Let's dare to do this, mm-hmm. right? And let's not have a bunch of structures imposed on it. Let's not try to pretend we're Franciscan or, or take some Legion of Mary type script, but let's just go for it. It means love the poor, and we'll make mistakes, but it's okay. We're just kind of dare to experiment, right? And now we don't use that term anymore. I'm not putting that on t-shirts because people think that is the lamest thing they've ever heard. Right. Another thing was like in the early part of our ministry, friendship evangelization. And that literally is what we do. Like, we love people, we befriend them, and we share about Jesus, because if you have a good friend, you would. Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But I don't like using that word in front of people today, too, because there's such an allergy in the church, kind of militant right now, against anything that sounds like a compromise or a weakness or like if you're not out there like smacking people with their sin, are you afraid to? What's the problem with you?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Uh-huh.
And that's just been an interesting change to see happen, because I don't think we should be smacking people with their sin. Yeah. And part of that is that I think Christianity is far beyond a list of do's and don'ts. Yeah. It's like, hey, stop these sins, that's your don'ts. Do these charitable works and prayer services or novenas or whatever, that's your do's. And now you're a Christian. And it's like, actually, you can completely miss the point of our whole religion if you say that's what it is, right?
Yep.
Now, I feel like the public face of the church, instead of being a list of do's and don'ts, needs to be, it should not be, hey, go serve the poor and therefore you're a Christian, or don't sin and therefore you're a Christian, or be chaste and therefore you're a Christian. It should be much more like walk with Christ.
Yeah.
And that's completely crazy. Mm-hmm. And it's the narrow way, right?
Yeah.
And then when we get people inside, we say, oh, are you struggling with this? Well, here's some interesting tool sets for you. Yeah. You know what I mean? Are you hating your neighbor? You judging people all the time? Well, here's a tool set to help you, right? But that shouldn't necessarily be the forward-facing face of the church, you know, because it's not an invitation into relationship with Christ. Say,
yeah. I agree with you, and I think where we kind of, at least in my arena, staying in my lane here with regards to healing and the healing world, and then the subgroup of that is the group of Christians that are trying to address homosexuality. There is a lack of repentance. There's no mention of homosexuality and repentance in the same sentence. It's so strange. I mean, even our beloved Pope, I would say, when he speaks about homosexuality, it's never about following Jesus and repenting of the ways that you haven't followed him in your sexuality. And I think that's sort of a pendulum swing or a reaction in which we're going to be so empathetic, but it sort of truncates the gospel, I think, in a way that isn't helpful for people. So it's not about becoming fire brimstone. And I'm hoping I'm saying this well, but it's also saying that's not good for you. That doesn't dignify you. And Jesus wants to help you there. Like, would you walk with us, And maybe I'll give you my witness too, or maybe she will give you her witness, where she has been tripped up by maybe not totally the same stuff, or maybe the same stuff, or maybe something similar, but where Jesus has helped her and she's come to repentance for the ways that she's had a hand in her own misery, but Jesus has saved her. I want that tone more than, okay, let's not go there because that's too heavy-handed, or let's just stuff them with the theology of the body and say, well, hey, you need to live this because this is important, or giving them some scholastic tome on chastity. Like, come on, Thomas Aquinas is going to help you become chaste. And not to say that those things can't be helpful, but I dare say we need kind of earthy, evangelical, in the truest sense of the word, just gospel-centric, gospel-empowered witnesses of people who have said, Jesus saved me here, and I want to invite you into a relationship with him, and I'll walk with you in it. You know, I hope, I mean, at least that's what has been empowering for me. And I hope to be that and empower others to do that too.
I don't know that I understood what you said. I want to say something kind of related, and then you give me feedback. Maybe it'll help me understand everything. But like, I always feel like our emphasis as evangelists, and I'm talking about evangelists, not talking to people within the church right now, shouldn't be that much different than Christ's emphasis or Paul's emphasis, or just essentially New Testament emphasis, right? And I do know that Christ himself uses fire and brimstone. You know, not a lot. Like it's not his main tool in the toolkit, right, of evangelization. And so I know that that's a valid tool, right? But I honestly think, like, right now, what seems most real to me is the fire and brimstone. Of course, could be a metaphor, it could be whatever, it could be real fire and brimstone. But I feel like people are literally just standing over an abyss of nothingness. Like, it's the nihilism, and the nihilism is the hell.
Yeah.
You know, we had Bishop Johnston on here, or our bishop of both of us. And he said, like, if you're not Catholic, what are you doing? Just waiting to die.
Yeah.
And that was like a great way to put it. Cause it was like, if you don't have a core set of beliefs and meaning and purpose, then what the hell are you doing? Are you just waiting to die? And that's very honest, you know?
Right.
And it's also like addressing kind of the nihilism problem of like, I don't know that you're going to feel flames of fire and brimstone, you know, if you sin or don't follow Christ or whatever. I do know that you'll be completely lost without purpose. And there's almost, and I personally can't imagine a greater hell than that right now.
Yeah.
You know?
Right.
So somehow inviting people out of the nihilism into something better.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm just throwing that out there. Like,
I think you're right. Like, I mean, when you say nihilism, I think of sort of those who have deconstructed the faith, even, you know, anthropologically, they wouldn't necessarily use those words, but I think of, you know, like the French or the Spaniards, who are kind of years ahead of Americans in regards to deconstructing. I think I could be wrong, but they're almost like, who cares? Like, do what you want. You know, who cares if you feel that or you do that, or it's almost just a complete disregard for culpability or, you know, any sort of moral compass or infrastructure. And so it's like, how do you get those people? How do you get people who are just totally numb to that, you know? And
well, there you're trying to evangelize someone who's like neck deep in theology, you know, but the majority of people who are evangelizing don't know one page of quality theology.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
I feel like the typical like liberal error is like permissiveness. You know, it's like, you know, just do what you want, right? Attitude, right? And the real question is, well, sir, what do you want? You know, I was watching this Protestant podcast, and they were talking about this seminary professor who was a guy who accidentally would cuss in class. And he would take smoke breaks after and before class. And so to all these like kind of like Calvinist seminarians, they're like, this guy feels like he's going to hell, but they found him like intensely interesting. And after he would talk, one of this guy who was giving the podcast was a seminarian. He goes up and he goes, but like, if I take you seriously, it'd just be like, do whatever you want, you know, like nothing. And he goes, exactly. But what do you want? Like, do you want sin? Is that what you really want? Because that's a big issue,
Right.
Like heal what you want,
Yeah.
So I feel like the liberal problem is that they kind of fall off the boat on permissiveness, right? But the conservative problem is they lose the essence of the religion in the do's and the don'ts. Like I think we did an example on this last retreat. We tried to use a sin that no one actually has. So we used like a sin of the chicken thief. You got this like maniacal chicken thief, right? And you want him to become Christian. His first job is to quit stealing the chickens.
Quit it, bro. It's
right. But now is he a Christian? No. Well, then you say, here's what you have to do. You have to do these prayers, or you have to do this charity work. You have to do this. You have to go to mass. You have to do all this. Now is he a Christian? The answer is no. And it's ridiculous because his problem is being a chicken thief, right? But like the core of the religion is neither of those things, And I think King David is my favorite because I think he's the ultimate man.
Yeah.
Like very tenderhearted, very like literally a raider, barbarian, warrior king, Yeah,
exactly.
And when you look at his like resume, most people don't think he's a saint. But actually, he might be the greatest saint. He's the one who Jesus was born of his line. He's a man after God's own heart, repeated over and over again in scripture, right? So it's like, here's a man who, I don't want to say lived a permissive life, but he lived a very passionate life.
Yeah.
But seemed to have the essence of the faith in him, to the point that he wrote the Psalms that all the monks are praying all day long. He literally taught everyone how to pray,
Yeah.
And he's a guy who doesn't measure well.
Yeah.
On holiness metrics.
It makes me think that, the work of conversion is a powerful work of the Holy Spirit. Like we just participate in that. So it's not necessarily a line or even our witness that brings people to faith, but it's Jesus. And I think this is where I really appreciated sort of the essay culture where you have people who have reached rock bottom, who have in their nihilistic, tendency, they have reached a point where it's like, I am miserable without God, without a higher power, but without Jesus, namely. And in that, there's an encounter with God, and I mean, I dare say people maybe just need to get saved. I actually kind of like that language, like get saved, go and hit that rock bottom and get saved. And I find that to be very true for my life, that I very much was a outward looking Christian, but not a Christian inwardly speaking, living duplicitously and hitting rock bottom, and in that rock bottom encountering the face of Jesus. So yeah, I don't have like any sort of ministry tricks to bring people to Jesus, but I think it really is his work, especially in a desperate state, that he does powerful work.
I think we're at an interesting moment that, like there've been different like world paradigms we've had over the ages, right? And sometimes they're Catholic paradigms, right? And now it feels like the popular paradigm is formed mostly by nihilism, or formed mostly by people who don't even admit there is a purpose. That's why I'm calling it nihilistic. And we're at the point now that this thought bubble that we're living in is so fragile that someone who's never been to college, who doesn't even seem that bright, can stand up and poke holes in it in a way that someone who has to be hyper educated has to try to explain away these holes they're poking, right? Yeah. And as they explain them away, you realize their explanation is merely resting on some authoritative sounding voice they're using, not based on real argument, Right.
Yeah.
And I think that that's a moment of, in a sense, rock bottoms may be overused as a term, but it's a moment of inflection in the culture where you can't just keep existing with this thought bubble that's so stupidly fragile that anyone, can poke a hole in it.
Yeah.
So I think we've got to go to a better worldview.
Yeah. I think too, like, it's simple, the gospel is so simple. Salvation, it's rather simple. I was dead, now I'm alive. I was this and now I'm that. I was pagan, now I'm a believer. dare I say, even one of Paul's letters is like, I was a homosexual, but now I'm not, type of thing. Like I was operating in worldly ways, but then I encountered, or I was washed by the blood of the Lamb, and now I'm different, you know? I love that simplicity. I really do. I think it's better than the sophistry of, well, you know, it's so thoughtful, thinking through my conversion, which I think is helpful. But there's something about surrendering in the deepest possible way in this stage of one's life, and being absolutely floored by the love of God in a place where you're just not getting it right, and you feel that in your bones. Like I'm not doing well here, and Jesus comes in a powerful way and saves us. I just think that needs, and I think, I dare say, God wants to do that more in our lives. I don't know how to set people up for that, but per se, other than keep doing what I'm doing in terms of our work, especially your work, Clark. I really admire your work and reaching out to those truly on the margins, and those who have very little to nothing, and being the face of Jesus to them. I mean, I pray that all of our efforts to the poor in my world and the poor in yours, we can be some sort of conduit of the Holy Spirit in their desperation, you know?
The funny thing though, is like the poor we work with at Simple House are never nihilistic.
Really?
Yeah. We're not evangelizing against nihilism, because the poor just know God.
Wow.
It's like the wealth of the poor. It's like, blessed be the poor. It's like, that is like their treasure. It's not cash, but it's like, it's hope. It's believing that there's someone who really cares about you in heaven. Like that is a very common feeling amongst the people we work with, almost no matter what their situation. Like sometimes not. But even then, you know, when you're at that very edge of existence, meeting God's the norm. Yeah. You know, not the exception. You know, it's almost when you're comfortable and fat, you get to the point you forget who God is, yep. You know? But so I feel like you're kind of working in this nihilistic challenge more than we are, in a sense, you know?
I mean, I think your experience is not totally dissimilar to ours, in that the people who come to us, because we're not very popular, people come to us in a state of desperation, and that there is a spark of hope. Like, I need help. I need Jesus to save me. I think more globally, whenever we speak maybe more prophetically as a ministry in regards to conversion therapy bans or things like that, I think that's when we start to see the sort of nihilistic mentality of, you know, even in France, Living Waters is almost illegal, and their conversion therapy ban is called Nothing to Heal. Nothing to Heal. And Living Waters is very much a part of that whole thing for them, you know, like, how dare you gather as Christians and try to you know, say that homosexuality is something that can be at least overcome in some way, you know? And the French are they're thoughtful, but, you know, in the name of, you know, fraternité, whatever, they do try to ban any effort, and in a way, what I think we're seeing is that it creates a hunger for people. Even if like this sort of nihilistic thing is global, there is like an underground swell, so to speak, of people that are like, I need this Jesus, you know? And so even if we can be that for them, I think we're doing a pretty good job. I want to say
something in defense of, like, as if I were talking to someone who really hated the idea of conversion therapy. It's like, if you wanted to stop people from sending their 13-year-old sons to some summer camp where they were mean to them and tried to, you know, do conversion therapy, that'd be one thing. But when you're trying to stop grown adults from getting together and sharing an idea, and that's just like, what's so threatening about that?
Yeah, you know? I agree with you.
I think that it's like, if the dominant culture was anti-homosexual, you could imagine conversion therapy almost being mean-spirited. But when the dominant culture is very pro-homosexual, and the only people seeking out some type of, you know, therapy would be people who have like gone against and probably lost friends because they even want to,
Yeah.
then
Right.
you're not really, you're showing a great weakness in your own worldview when you try to ban it.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know?
Exactly.
Go
Yeah.
ahead.
We're definitely the minority in
Right.
that arena, you know? And so we're just saying, hey, you have every on ramp to be LGBTQ identified. Can we have ours to be Christians in this area of our life?
Right. Let me ask one more question. So you kind of talked about, all right, so let's talk about like a heterosexual issue of like just plain old lust, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You could imagine a heterosexual man living a chaste life, still being tempted by it for his whole life, you know, and maybe another guy would claim he completely got over it, never felt lust again when he turned, 29. I don't know, but even if I met that guy, I'd be like, be careful, be getting too confident. You know what I mean? That you've protected yourself completely from that. When you deal with same-sex attraction, are you saying that, are you seeing where people do still struggle with it, for their entire lives? Mm-hmm. Or are you trying to say there's like a complete, I don't know, like, tell me your thoughts on that.
Yeah. I mean, I think, usually what I see is, people who are truly strugglers, who are struggling with a residual, I would say, same-sex attraction in their life, but it's not dominating. What I mean by dominating is that they are open to being a gift to the opposite one. And it's not to say marriage is the end of every story, but I do think the end of every story is gift. Using the language of John Paul II, am I a gift to the other? As a man, am I a gift to woman? Do I empower woman? Do I honor woman as a man? Not boyishly as like gay Marco, but as a man who can dignify who she is, and for her to dignify me as who I am as a man. I think that's the end of every story. Now, sometimes that ends in marriage, sometimes that ends in priesthood or consecrated life or, unwanted singleness or celibacy for the kingdom outside of whatever. It can end in many ways, but I see people knowing what their wound is, not afraid or surprised by their familiar vulnerability to same-sex attraction, and able to resume the journey of gift giving, even in the midst of that. I think that is true healing. I don't think it's, well, I've never had a same-sex attracted thought in 5 years. It's like, wow, you're so healed. I don't think that's the goal. I think the goal is I'm still able to be a gift in it. As same as somebody who's a victim of sexual abuse. A therapeutic goal would never be that the sexual abuse implications of that on your life emotionally would never resurface again. I mean, that's just an absurd therapeutic goal. I mean, no therapist worth his or her salt would ever say that to a client, to say, after you come to me, you will never feel the implications of your past abuse. But I think the healing is in, okay, yes, this is a familiar wound, and I have familiar areas and ways in which I cope with the difficult things in my life, acting badly out of this wound. But my healing is, I'm going to resume the journey of gift giving. And yes, I have this wound, and I have to keep this wound clean, because I can get dirty in this wound. I can sin out of this wound. I can harm others out of this wound. I can not dignify myself and the other out of this wound. And so I need the church to be a place where I keep my wound clean. And even Jesus in his glory is wounded, but they're clean. They're clean wounds. And so I want the same. So yes, I think most people that I work with who struggle with same-sex attraction, there is an awareness of a struggle, but it's not dominating, and it's not leading them to a sort of stalling in a gay identity, but launching them hopefully into good gift giving, whatever that may mean for their life.
Well, God bless you, Marco. I find this conversation, difficult, and I know you talk about it all the time, so I just want to thank all our audience who hung in there on this. So do you want to give any contact info or anything?
Yeah. So if you want to get in touch with Desert Stream, just go to desertstream.org. desertstream.org. And there you can find, my email, other people's email on staff. And if you need our help, please don't hesitate to reach out. We're pretty communicative. So we will get back to you as soon as we can and try to get you connected and some online stuff. If you don't have a Living Waters group around you, we're happy to get you connected and to get you on a journey of wholeness if these are your issues.
All right. Thank you so much, Marco.
Clark, thanks so much.